So welcome everyone. Get my PowerPoint up and going here. I'm Anita McKeag with the Metro Planning Department, and we are here for the second meeting of the Bellevue Community Plan Amendment. So here's tonight's, let me go to screen. I always forget to do this part, which is important, slideshow. All right, but now I can't see anybody else. Tonight's meeting format, we're going to briefly talk a little bit of background. Applicant going to provide a brief presentation, and then most of the time is going to be for Q&A and comments. So we've got a lot of people here tonight who can help us answer questions. You know, the Metro Planning Department, we're reviewing the applications and we're also helping to facilitate this meeting. A lot of the questions will be answered and discussed by the applicant team. I think everyone knows where this property is by now. Coley Davis, the river bend, but right now the access is Morton Mill Road. Back in August, I'm sure several of you joined in this meeting. We had a community meeting. We had about 70 people join in. We heard a lot of questions and concerns, including disturbing floodplain, what happens with additional flooding, traffic, street connections, apartments, construction traffic noise. The applicant team needed some additional time to discuss and get more details from departments. And so the planning department then committed to facilitating the second meeting so that we could have another dialogue and discussion. So as I've said, we're meeting this evening to have that additional discussion. We are still in listening mode and evaluation mode. It's important to stress that that's the main purpose of this meeting, is to share information, listen, and gather your feedback, and no decisions regarding this project and the two applications have been made by the planning department at this time. So several of you reached out to me, and I've chatted on the phone with so many people in the past 2 weeks. So I got this question a lot, and I put this slide in here because folks wanted to know, why are we even discussing this? You know, Anita, you know Bellevue does not like apartments. Why are you making us spend time to discuss it? Well, this project has some merits, and we're not going to debate those because it's just like, this is how something gets to this point. You know, you weigh pros and cons. So housing options, more people to support businesses, Harpeth Greenway, extensions, connections, and connect and activate a new park. So potential benefits. That's how we get to this point. So as you know, community plans guide future land use decisions around the built to natural environments. We're out here in the Bellevue Community Plan. This area is suburban and rural when we look at a spectrum of building types. The existing policy is T2 rural maintenance, and that was put in place. The last time we updated fully this plan, like in detail, was after the 2010 flood, so 2011, 2012. The rural policy in this color then is conservation policy, and then here you see the park. Now that this is parkland, this really needs to change to this green color too. But rural policy was put in place then because, as you see, limited access. It was used as a farm, didn't have any other access other than one driveway across the railroad track. So the applicant is requesting then suburban neighborhood evolving policy to more closely tie in with residential in other parts of Bellevue. You see this yellow color, suburban neighborhood maintenance. So you see that along Coley Davis and Morton Mill Road here. And then, you know, we're talking about two different things, but they're definitely tied together. You know, I'm part of the long range planning team. So my world is land use policy, the character of an area, the future of an area. And then the applicants also applied to change the zoning so that we could talk in more detail about what's planned for the property. And the zoning then would change from agricultural and residential to specific plan as their request. Zoning's the law, land use policy is the vision. So with that being said, I know I covered a lot of information, but like I said, we're trying to get to Q&A as soon as possible. Alan, are you the one taking off?
I am. So if I could share my screen, and somebody might have to tell me where to go to do that.
Yeah, Sade, can you pass him the privileges?
There it is.
Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Does everybody see that? Hold on. Now does everybody see that?
It says it's starting to share content, Alan. Your screen's still blank right now, but it says starting to share.
Okay, you've sharing screen too. It shows it sharing. So I guess we're just waiting for the technical aspect of it.
Are you trying to show a very large graphic?
Oh, it's a PowerPoint.
Just see a black screen.
Alan, are you sharing your full screen or are you just sharing the application?
It looks like I'm sharing the entire screen, right? I got somebody. There we go.
Okay, here we go.
All right, now you got it? Okay, good. All right, well, appreciate that, Anita. We will go through a quick presentation here. We've also heard a lot of concerns, a lot of questions regarding the project. This is where we left off at our meeting in August. Traffic, Coley-Davis, stormwater and flood elevations, and CSX coordination and construction access. These were key components that was brought to our attention. So now what we're looking at is the community plan amendment, proposing a T3 neighborhood evolving. So how does this project meet this criteria? Access to a major transportation networks, opportunities for higher connectivity, significantly higher connectivity, support nearby consumer businesses, adequate infrastructure with utilities and pedestrian trail access, transition from adjacent development to neighborhoods. So that's how we feel that we meet this land use policy and it's appropriate for this area. All right, so as you know, and Nita went over, here's our site. We're all familiar with its location. We're currently surrounded by the majority of T3 land use. So it'd be consistent with that T3 land use to the majority of our surrounding area there. As we talked about, we would have access coming to the site. And that's the key component that, the fact that this site did not have an access solution was the key component. It landed in this particular area in the first place, is my understanding. Well, we have a solution for that access to the site, and that's what changes the dynamics. And when we change those dynamics, that's where we would be requesting for a T3 neighborhood evolving. Along with this request, Metro Parks is requesting OS, which is an open space designation for their 51 acres that would be ultimately be an activated park. Here's the site. You can see Metro Parks 51 acres. That's immediately to our west. Ours is right at 44 acres approximately. We're going to look at the existing site conditions. So this is one of the big concerns, flooding. It is a floodplain. It functions as a floodplain. We saw that in 2020. The flood waters came up to the edge of Coley-Davis and they came up into the fields as it functions as a floodplain. And so I think that's very important to understand that we cannot change those dynamics. The other thing we would show is roughly a 250-foot wide TVA or electric easement going across the top of the aerial CSX railroad to our south, and obviously the Harpeth River along our other borders. So that being said, we had to be very particular about the area that we could utilize effectively. That's all up here above that floodplain area. And so this is what we would be proposing, and we'll go into some detail further about the actual layout. But this shows our site and how it be proposed. So the solution to the access to site would be a 500-foot span of what this light blue area, that is your floodway. Those waters are moving during a flood event. The purple area is floodplain. Those waters back up and are stagnant, but they're not moving during the flood event. So we have to cross that 500-foot area here over the floodway, and then we have another 100-foot before we get to a roundabout here, where we'd be providing access to Metro's park, 51-acre park, and future access to what we're going to dedicate to Metro as a public park as well. The rear, you can see located here. You can barely see the existing driveway. It kind of comes over here and goes over to the house. we would have that same crossing as an emergency access only. It currently has roughly 10 cars a day going back and forth through there to the facility that's currently there. And that traffic would be eliminated altogether. It would be gated and locked for emergency access only. That access would be given to emergency responders such as Metro Police or Metro Fire at Station 37. So looking at the other aspect that Anita brought up, we have a conservation land use policy that's in place here as well. And you can see we've avoided and stayed out of that conservation area policy as well. Public improvements. This site brings a lot of public improvements to the table. Otherwise, we really wouldn't be here tonight talking about it. It's the developer in Cypress Brook has been looking at this for about a 2.5-year period, very patiently understanding the full dynamics and the full impact it would have, and the necessary infrastructure to put in place to accommodate and mitigate for that impact. That said, this is our Greenway system that currently lays in place. It dead ends at the CSX Railroad, a little farther back from where Morton Mill dead ends over here to the east. Runs all the way along Morton Mill, comes out at the golf course where everybody knows the trailhead is here, and then goes all the way up to Edwin past Ensworth. And this section, actually, if we added to that point, would link to a 10-mile section that goes all the way to the end of Belmead Boulevard. So an access trail that would have a significant difference to it. To do that, we have a significant barrier in CSX Railroad. So we have to look at how do we connect this point to that point. Cypress Brook, in addition to dedicating the park space to the park, would also be obligated and committed to build the Greenway Trail system as well as a tunnel. And we'll look at that key component as well as we go through these infrastructure improvements. I point this out. This is a key juncture that we've looked at for over 20 years with multiple developers and never had a solution until today. That junction allows us to continue along the riverbanks with possibilities of even continuing a greenway that could go under the interstate, past our future high school, and connect all the way out to the Riverwalk one day. But you have to have these key component connections at these particular areas, and this is one of those key components. Let's see. All right, so again, looking at public infrastructure, you can see here, existing site. Here's the Metro Park that's been put in place and dedicated to Metro. Along Coley Davis, the first infrastructure we would look at would be a bike path that would connect to the existing sidewalk of Harpeth Springs, take you all the way to the MTA parking ride, the WeGo parking ride at that location. That basically would be along the edge of that road. It would be very clearly marked, both in paint and vertical pickets. The paint gives a clear identification to the driver that this is not a driving lane. The vertical pickets is a safety aspect that gives the pedestrian a comfort level that if a car is coming over there, they can hear it because they will hit these vertical pickets. And the driver, when they hit it, they know they're too far into that lane, and it informs them, hey, you need to get out of that lane. So this is a high level, very safe bike route that we'd be using along Coley Davis. Secondly would be the bridge that we discussed earlier. That'd be a 500-foot span. That bridge would be multi-purpose. It'd have a bike lane to each side. It would have 2 traffic drive aisles, and it would also have a pedestrian sidewalk crossing. So multimodal in both cycle, pedestrian, and automotive to cross over that area and provide access to the future 50 acres and additional 20-acre Metro Public Park land. Then we look at the Greenway Trail along the Harpeth. That Greenway Trail from this point to CSX here is approximately 1,600 feet. So a significant length that would be improved by the developer to this point. And at that point, you'll see the crossing that will have to occur. But in addition to this improvement, the 20 acres that you see here, improvement number 4, is 20 acres that would be dedicated to Metro Parks. We would also give and build them access to that park. So you could have a combination of 70 total acres of public parks surrounding this area here. That would be up to Metro Parks to program, and they would have to understand how they would take it from that point. But this improvement would be given to them. Getting under CSX Railroad, and that was one of the questions that was asked back in August of last year. What about CSX? 2 components we had to coordinate with CSX. One was the can we make this drive section over here a emergency only access, and we have gotten agreement on that. We are currently working with them on the next portion of that, which is the tunnel that would come under CSX, and collaborating with them on that aspect of it. This would be a significant tunnel, one that you could see in the new portion of Percy Warner Park that's over to the west side, actually, yeah, the west side of Highway 100, right at Old Hickory Boulevard. There's been a tunnel put in under CSX if you want to see the scale of that and understand it. That being said, it would be a 10-foot vertically clear tunnel. So this is a large tunnel that would accommodate both pedestrians on a cycle and pedestrians from a walking standpoint. So we're going to touch on the layout. Before we go to the layout, these improvements that we're looking at here, from the bridge to the tunnel to the improvement of the Greenway system to the improvement along those improvements alone come up to approximately $7 to $8 million that are all going to be on the back of the developer to actually provide those and improve those and put those in place, which he will be held to as per the zoning that is proposed. Now, quickly on the layout. Again, you'll see this is our site location. We have 7 buildings shown here. These are multifamily buildings. You do see some smaller buildings that are located here. Those are smaller garage units that can be rented by the tenants of these buildings. You'll see a little pool area, and we'll get an image of that here later. We are proposing 417 units. The height of these buildings will change from the north end to the southern end. Before we look at that in detail, I want to look at the surroundings. Immediately to our west is a 51-acre park. Immediately to our east is a 20-acre dedicated park with an additional activated park on the other side of the river. Immediately to our north is Coley Davis Road and I-40. And to our south is CSX Railroad. On the other side of CSX, even directly south of us, is more of open field area. We will look at some detail in terms of this relationship to Morton Mill, and I know there's some concerns from the folks on that house. So this is more of an illustrative layout that we're looking at here. When you look at that, you can see the buildings that are laid out. You have a circulated system of parking. And what we like about that is that only provides a single bay of parking. So it's not like multiple bays of parking like you'd see in a parking lot and have a sea of cars. It's a single bay of parking that surrounds that facility there. You'll see some little darker green areas that are located in these little courtyards, so to speak. Those green areas are water quality retention ponds. And those water quality ponds will take our stormwater, treat it, and clean it before it leaves our site. You'll see some of these larger green areas here. Those areas will detain that water, hold that water back so that we can't send any more water into that floodplain system than what is currently there today. And Metro Water Services will not allow us to permit unless we can prove that to them. And they'll review those plans and we'll get final approval. So there's not a way that we can have or promote a negative impact on that. This is just kind of a close-up of the entrance of the bridge coming across Coley Davis. Again, a roundabout circulation system that gives our side access as well as access to both sides for Metro Public Parks. To the south, that's our emergency access. And you can see this is the location where the driveway just comes across grade. We would pick it up at that point, carry it over into our site. These red locations, that's where you would see a gate, a locked gate. You will not have automotive circulation come through there at all unless there is an emergency situation in which we have to utilize that. That's the only times that that would be open. And that will also be part of the zoning that comes forth after the land use policy. And the developer and any other developer would be held to that requirement. Okay, that's a zoomed out picture. What we did want to do is talk about connections here. The connectivity that we've increased is now you have a route over to this site in the bridge that we're seeing here. The existing residents along Coley Davis theoretically could take their bike across the bridge, be on a Greenway Trail, and bike all the way to Bellmead Boulevard, should they so please. The residents to the south of the CSX, thousands and thousands of single-family residents over here, can now take their bike all the way over to the soccer fields, cross the river, get on a bikeway system, and go all the way to the park and ride that MTA has at this point. So the pedestrian connectivity is significant. Should there be another emergency event, should there be a wreck on Coley Davis and it could not move past from this point to that point, the bridge could be opened up to let relief cars come through our site and use the emergency access lane. Should there be a situation where some reason Morton Mill Road is blocked, this emergency access could be opened up and it would give them free flowing over to Coley Davis and another option to get out. So we have increased that connectivity point. So in addition to that, the Greenway system that we've talked about earlier here, we've taken a site that's been really restricted and isolated both by the Cumberland River, the CSX Railroad, and TVA easements that come across it. And we would activate it to the point where that connectivity would be significantly improved. This is just some renderings of what you would see. And going back to the site, I want to touch base quickly on building height. The building heights that you see in these 5 buildings right here would be at a 3-story height. They transition down to a 3-story height at this point. The 2 buildings you see at the northern end, those would be at a 4-story height. The distance from this point on Morton Mill over to the building is about a football field, so 300 foot away from this point to that point on a building. Significant difference distance from the Morton Mill neighborhood to the buildings to the most northern portion of that site. So there's huge separation from that of the existing residents to what we'd be proposing. Now looking at the actual renderings of the site is more of a urban contemporary type look. The quality of these apartments would be that likened to the Sawyer at the back of One Bellevue Place, with compatible rents with the Sawyer of One Bellevue Place as well. So this would be an upper scale residential facility. Then we drop down to the remaining portions, the 5 southern buildings. They would be a smaller scale down to a 3-story that you see something similar to this. The amenity areas will be
Hey, Alan, are you close? I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's Anita. Are you close to wrapping up? Because we've got a long Q&A list.
I do. This is
Thank you.
pretty close. So this shows the amenity area. It will be a high-end amenity area that comes with residents. And then we just want to end with those remaining comments that we had there in terms of why this makes a good, logical sense for a T3 neighborhood land use policy. All right, that's it.
Wonderful, thank you. So I've got some folks helping me keep up with order of questions in the Q&A feature, and then we've still got some people raising their virtual hands. So we'll kind of go back and forth, but I think our question list may be 40 people long right now, and so
Okay.
I know several of you have told me you have numerous questions, but let's start with everyone asking one question at a time, please. Otherwise, we won't get very far on our person list. So ask your most important question. I think Devin, you're first. Devin Schultz.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, I threw a curveball at me, Anita, with only one question, but I guess I would like to talk about the emergency access. Has the fire chief approved the emergency access at this point? And if not, how can you say that it will only be emergency access if the fire chief has not approved that that for the zoning change? And related to that question, what I'm hearing emergency access, I was assuming that it was only police, and I guess the police chief might have to approve that as well. But I was assuming it was only police and fire. Now I'm hearing that it's also any vehicular traffic that might be rerouted due to something happening on Coley Davis. Who controls the gate in that case? And you know, these houses off of Morton Mill are less than 30 feet off the road. It's a 24-foot wide road, and there are cars parked on the sides. I'm just wanting with a realistic nature of using this Morton Mill as a quote unquote emergency access nature is. Plus, I have a comment from somebody in planning who's not Anita, who said that 9 times out of 10, quote unquote emergency access only arrangements quit working. I think she said within the first 2 years, and it just becomes an open access situation. So if you could address those questions, please. That question.
Okay, Anita, would you like me to address that? Okay.
Yes, please.
Good questions. And it is exactly what we have defined it to be. It is an emergency access. If Coley Davis is shut down, that would be justification of an emergency. If Morton Mill was shut down, that would be justification of an emergency. So that's what would be deemed as, hey, we need to use this emergency access so that people have the ability to come and go from their home in case of a catastrophic event. I don't think there's any, I can't speak for the person from planning. I know the emergency accesses that we have utilized and proposed in developments over the past, that is not true in any form or shape, that the emergency access would just go away. This is not a road that is just got a gate on it. It's and connecting. So it's not like we're connecting a full cross section of a road to Morton Mill, and you could just open it up and it becomes a road. This is a at-grade emergency access drive to accommodate a single vehicle. This is not like a huge access drive. And so the likelihood of that ever changing, I would see not likely at all. So that would be my answer to it.
Who controls
Logan,
the
did
gate?
you?
The
No.
gate would be controlled by emergency services, either police or fire. Part of the review process that we go through for the SP will be commented on by the fire chief.
Logan, you talked to the fire marshal this week. Do you have anything to add?
Sure. I did talk with the fire marshal to make sure that he was aware of this plan and that he had seen the proposed emergency access here, and they did not have a concern with the proposed situation. They indicated that the proposed bridge from Coley Davis would be the primary entry point to the site, and that the emergency access would only be used in the case that the primary access from Coley Davis was unavailable. They also mentioned that it would potentially be beneficial to the Morton Mill Road residents that currently are served by a single access point, that the emergency access could potentially go two ways, where they could access Morton Mill Road in the case of an incident where that road was shut down. But they have seen these plans and they don't have any concerns with the proposed emergency access.
Thank you. Let's take Jim Rossi next.
T3 NE and how the proposal should proceed if it's approved. But I want to step back a step, if that's okay. The question I want to pose is really just going back to your application where you first filed for this, and you stated that T3NE policy is needed in order to construct necessary infrastructure required that would support a residential development of the property and provide needed opportunity for future public access and connectivity. That's what you stated in the filing. I guess I'm puzzled by that. And my question's really twofold. First of all, just part of this is a clarification question. To clarify, apart from all the things associated with the apartment complex, the only real connectivity for the community here is the short bike path on Jim Fussel's land and the tunnel that goes underneath CSX. We already have a pedestrian bridge that crosses the Harpeth from the soccer fields to the Frisk land. It's the connectivity that the green path that is the real benefit, apart from some of the other things like the bridge, right? Or am I missing something? That's part one. But can I just continue? I mean, that's part of the question. But then, apart from the bike path, I'm puzzled by your claim that this is necessary, because it seems to me that AR2 zoning, the current zoning, works and is harmonious with surrounding zoning in terms of ways it could be developed into residential property. The property owner can build one single family home per 2 acres, so he could build easily 4 to 10 homes and sell them for $2 million each. Here, based on what new homes are selling for in our zip code. And CSX will grant a private, just as we already have a driveway crossing the tracks here that's used by 10 cars, there's an application process before CSX, and you could get a private approval of that. Scenic River Lane might be a model for this, where we have a private road, crosses CSX tracks, and then we have 9 fairly nice homes with big lots. And why couldn't this be done on the property? And then it would be up to the developer to do a bike path, or the community to find resources, or the city to find resources and work with the developer to develop that, I don't know how many 100 yards it is, on Fussel's land into a bike path that hopefully has a tunnel. But even if it doesn't have a tunnel, there are many other areas where bike paths cross railroad tracks.
Okay, well, 2 good questions. And they're kind of both related to the bike path from what I'm hearing. Well, one is the connectivity. The connectivity of the bridge activates a huge portion of what would be future Metro Parks. Metro Parks has 51 acres currently on the other side of the bridge. And yeah, you can get to it through a pedestrian bridge significant distance away if you park in the soccer field parking lot, which is locked with a gate unless there are soccer events. So I think that's a little tricky there. But you cannot get across from an automotive standpoint at this point. So what the bridge would do, the bridge would open it up to automotive and, well, cycle and pedestrian would all be accommodated on the bridge. To your point, which is a valid point, you can cycle across there now, you can walk across there now. But it is very much working your way through a parking lot, and it's only beneficial to the north side of CSX. There's not really a connection to the south side of CSX. And there's thousands of homes that would have the ability to connect under the CSX if we provided a tunnel, extended the greenway that's currently there to the greenway path that we want to have, all the way to where it does cross now from a pedestrian standpoint, and then all the way up to a bridge that they could continue on. So the levels of connectivity would significantly increase. In terms of residential development, I suppose you could. You could possibly do 4 single-family homes. It's from a platting standpoint and approval standpoint, and the fire marshal being okay with 4 homes coming off of the current drive that's there. That's a process. I can't tell you whether or not that would be approved or not. But when we look at that, and you're only going to, let's say, 4 large homes, and let's say you do get $2 million a piece. You got 4 large homes there and a 50-acre park that's behind them that really can't be activated, and a riverfront that really is not going to be connected. And so we have 4 residents in a population of 43,000 that gets to enjoy that area. And we have the ability to engage and improve it to a public access, both for metro parks, making it a destination in the Bellevue community, and huge connectivity parts for so many residents that surround the area. And I think that's the real benefit that's brought. Now, again, and I appreciate what you said, because it's really speaking to the type of use and the density associated with it. And I think what you're looking at here is we have somebody that can come to the table and provide a solution that helps accommodate this infrastructure, which we do not have an answer for today, and we have not had an answer for it for 20 plus years. So I guess that would be my answer.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. That's one of my tasks. So Heather Wright's next.
Hey, thank you so much. And I am a resident of the area, wanted to call in, and actually am on vacation with my family. So I'm going to drop off as soon as I get to speak, but I don't really have a question. I just wanted to call in and voice support for extending the Greenway and an opportunity to have the Greenway extended. I enter the Greenway from the golf course, and the direction that goes towards Ensworth High School along the river is usually very crowded, whereas the direction of the Greenway going the other direction is not as crowded. And it would be great if we could go farther and then have to then stop and turn back around. And if a private developer has already agreed to do that, as well as to extend the park access and dedicate further lands to parks, then I think it's a great option for the community and for those of us who use the existing greenway, which I think there are, and I so maybe this could be a question, but the some people seem to be focused on the emergency access. I think we all need to keep in mind that that type of emergency that would require that access might be a once a year or a once every 2 or 3 years event, whereas there are 364 other days of the year that everybody in the community could be utilizing that greenway. So that's not really a question, but I will, I'm going to jump off so I can go join my family for dinner, if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for participating.
Thank you for your input.
Abigail Tyler's next.
There we go. Okay, so you've previously stated that trucks would be restricted as to when they could come and go on Morton Mill Road during the bridge construction. Several questions along that line. Is that still the case? And if so, what are the hours they'll be allowed to operate? Those kind of first two ones.
Okay. Okay. You bring up a good point. So let's talk construction traffic. That was a major concern, and I get it. I completely understand. I would have similar concerns. We have worked with Councilman Rosenberg over the 2.5 years here. He expressed that, and what we looked at is we want to minimize the impact on neighbors as much as possible. We will have to utilize Morton Mill Road in order to be on the other side of the river to build the abutment for the bridge. So we're going to minimize that truck access time-wise to approximately a year and a half. Those hours of operations, and I may have to have Mike, you kind of speak to the hours of operations. But the point of it is we would minimize that and keep both the number and when they could come and go down to a very small scale. Once the bridge is built and in place, all construction traffic would revert to Coley Davis at that point. And so we'd be accessing more from the interstate Highway 70 south. We're a quarter of a mile. Well, we're about a half a mile from the intersection of Highway 70 south. So we're really, really close at that point. So no vertical component of the site, no buildings going up, nothing will happen until that bridge is built and in place. At that point, no construction traffic will be coming down. Mike, could you speak to hours of the day?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. The basically, I believe that the city of Nashville has a standard operating time. I believe it's from 8 to 5, I believe, and we would be restricted to those times. We'd also be committing, any sort of damage or anything that happens along Morton Mill during that construction phase. We'd be responsible for taking care of repairing and everything. And again, just to reiterate, as you noted, Alan, that we would only be doing that during the period of building the bridge, which will not be a lot of traffic. And again, the bulk of the mobilization will happen on the north side of the river. While we need to be on the south side to do that abutment and such, that will be as little as we really have to do. And again, we will only go vertical once the bridge is built.
Well, and for those on Coley Davis, I'm sure they're hearing it and saying, "Oh, great! Well, we're getting the rest of the construction traffic." That is our key point of access, and we want to be transparent about that. However, we will be very sensitive to avoid peak times during that aspect, and any kind of issue regarding to the road, if there's any damage whatsoever, that would be repaired very quickly and rapidly. So I think from a Coley Davis standpoint, I think they need to know that we're going to avoid peak times for them and try to minimize any kind of negative impact over our duration of the construction traffic. Okay, Anita.
Thank you, Olivia. Olivia's helping me. Thanks, Olivia.
All right, we're gonna go to Councilmember Gloria Hauser. She's here with us.
Yes, thank you very much, and I appreciate your putting this on and advertising it so widely. The questions that I have is, if I lived on Morton Mill, I looked at this and say I'm getting 100% of the benefits, and it's costing me about 2% of pain. If I live on Coley Davis, I say it's costing me 98% of the pain. And so why is it that we can only make this work if the bridge goes to Coley Davis? Why can we not have the crossing at CSX on the Morton Mill Road? You already have a wide road there, much wider actually than I believe Coley Davis is. So why can't we just make the entrance over the CSX or the tunnel you're going underneath? Why not make that tunnel big enough that the cars could go? Or is there some other way that you could access by maybe taking the bridge a different direction, more towards the soccer field, so that you would enter behind the Home Depot and the church and the exits that are already at 70 from there, so that all the burden isn't being held by the folks that live on Coley Davis? Because that's what I'm hearing from them. They're feeling that they're the ones that are carrying the burden for the community to have the wonderful additions of the greenways, et cetera, which are all wonderful. And I applaud the developer for being willing and to put that into the plans. But I need to answer to my constituents, and my constituents are really concerned about why we seem to be catering to the folks of Morton Mill and saying, oh, don't worry, we're not going to cause you any issues. You're going to be fine and dandy. We're just going to make all the issues on Coley Davis. So answer your response to that.
All right, I'd be happy to. I appreciate that. And those are good points made, Gloria. I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. So Council Lady Hauser, sorry. The reason we've taken the approach that we've taken. First, let's start from a planning standpoint. For that, I'm going to have to. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let's start from a planning standpoint. So here's our site right here. So why would we not just take a bridge, go over CSX, jump onto Morton Mill, and put our main entrance here and 417 units located to the Morton Mill area? Well, when you look at it from a planning perspective, when you look at density and housing options being added to your community, such as what we're looking at, you see where our site's located here. The quickest access to the main artery, the main thoroughfare, which is I-40 and Highway 70 South, is immediately Coley Davis. We could theoretically come out Morton Mill. Now we're sending 417 residential units, and these are residential units, paying taxes and feeding our commercial centers and providing economic development at the same time. Now we're sending them through Morton Mill. They have to go to the interstate, right? So they're going to drive all the way along Morton Mill through an existing neighborhood. We're going to put traffic on all of Morton Mill. Then we're going to put additional traffic on Old Harding Pike. And Old Harding Pike's going to come up here to Sawyer Brown. We're going to put that additional traffic all along Sawyer Brown, where it will then empty out onto Highway 70, going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 traffic lights at that point. Or we could bring them out onto Coley Davis on the remaining 2.5, well, about a half mile, and I'll work my way down back this direction. Sorry. So you're a half mile away. So logically, from a planning standpoint, this makes the most logical sense that this density would go straight across to an existing thoroughfare that is a half a mile away from a major arterial, from a significant major arterial. So from a planning standpoint, you want them to have that access. You want to focus them to your main arterials here. You also want them to have easy access to your main services and retail center that is just newly built over here, from restaurants, supporting restaurants, stores, Fordyce, etc. So logically, this makes the most sense. You brought up another good question. Well, why can't we just cross another location? Well, then you got to look at means of what that crossing the other location and coming out on another area here. And you really don't have a means of crossing to another roadway pattern. You could cross to the back of a Home Depot. You can't really get to an existing roadway. I believe that's your closest roadway that kind of dead ends right there. And again, if we cross here, the expansion of the bridge would be significantly longer, still having an impact. But what you do is you take all this density and you throw it into River Plantation going through back roads to get out to Sawyer Brown. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different traffic signals that we're adding additional traffic that you don't need to add that additional traffic to. This is the logical solution. So then you look at where do you come out on Coley Davis. In order to be the least amount of impact on our floodway and on our floodplain, we want to cross at the narrowest point. This is the narrowest point on that. And that's a big concern. I get it. I live in Bellevue. I was there when it flooded. That's a big concern. We do not want to have a negative impact whatsoever on that floodplain. So we have to be super sensitive. So we cross at a 90. From a roadway perspective, when you come in on a roadway like Coley Davis, you want to come in as close to a 90-degree angle as you can. We're coming in at a dead center 90-degree angle. So those are all excellent points. And I hear burden. And, you know, as Nashville grows, there's growing issues across town. I see growth as a positive and opportunity. But you do have to suffer through certain things being improved. When interstates are improved, we have to kind of suffer through the time of those being improved. But it's infrastructure that is part of a growing, healthy, vibrant community. And yeah, there will be some issues there. I'm not going to say that we're not going to change anything and have no impact on the Harpeth Coley Davis resident. Sorry. Because we will be adding traffic into that system, but we are going to mitigate it to the highest level to keep that from being a negative, both from a construction standpoint and a long-term community standpoint. I guess that's
Okay, Alan, we're gonna move to the next question. All good points, just moving us along.
Okay, our next hand raised is Mary Catherine Kinney.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, Mary Catherine.
Let me call you right back. Hi guys, so sorry, I was just on the phone. I was just saying, I thank you for giving me the chance to speak. Sorry, I got a work call right before you unmuted me. I just wanted to chime in and just say that I appreciate this conversation so much, and it's been really enlightening to listen in. I'm a Davidson County homeowner and resident, and I learned about the development just on the local news. I am such a supporter of the project. I've lived in Davidson County for 12 years and have just seen the development of Nashville, as I think most of us here have. And as development continues, especially in Bellevue, it's a place that I spend a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time kayaking, bike riding in the green spaces in that neighborhood. I'm just thrilled to hear that there's thoughtful development coming. It's a community forward. It's like this feels very community forward, protecting the parts of Bellevue that we all know and we love, and creating more access to like green spaces, bike paths, kayak drops. Like, I just believe as our city grows, it's imperative that we have more developments like this, because it's inevitable that we're going to continue to have development in Middle Tennessee. We all know it, but it's really encouraging, and I'm super supportive of developers that are thinking community first and are trying to protect the green space of Middle Tennessee. It's one of the reasons that I live here. It's one of the reasons that I work in music. I spend a ton of time in New York and in LA, but I come back home to Tennessee, and this is the reason why. And I believe that I don't want to see these spaces get lost, and I believe that thoughtful development is something we should support. It's going to happen no matter what. It's going to happen no matter what. We all know that. And I'm really supportive of developers who continue to reinvest in the reason that we love Nashville. And I'm like incredibly supportive of this. So I just wanted to share that it's one of the only developments that I've seen in Middle Tennessee or in Nashville lately that has been been so thoughtful. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation because I just really believe in the development. So thank you for giving me the chance to talk.
Thanks, Mary Catherine. We're going to go to Jen Pearson next.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, wasn't sure my audio was working. Yeah, I guess I kind of had a similar question that's already been asked. You know, I've lived in this area for 20 years and I'm a Nashville native from this side of town, and I hire a lot of people who are looking for houses. They live in apartments, they want a house, and they can't find a house. So I guess I ask, why are we not considering houses? I understand 400 people versus 4, but honestly, I didn't move to Bellevue to live with 400 extra people. I moved because it was quiet, and I think we need to preserve some of that in Nashville. I have a lot of other questions, but I think that's kind of my biggest thing is why are we not considering houses for this area? It seems like we're just trying to cram more people into an area that is not been like that before.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to, I think it's Abigail Tyler or Taylor.
Hi. Yeah. So I represent this district on the MMPS school board, and the new apartments are going to be zoned to Harpeth Valley Elementary. It currently serves K through 4, and it's actually nearing capacity. It's very close to it. Starting in the 2023-24 school year, it's actually going to add 5th grade. So because of that influx of students, it's actually been identified by MMPS as one of the schools that's going to need an addition built onto it to properly serve the students K through 5 in one building. So how many school-age children do you expect to live in these apartments, and how did you come to that number?
Well, that's a great question. I appreciate that. The amount expected are 33 K through 12. The amount per metro calculations is 44. So we would see probably at the high end 44 children. Majority of these apartments are single bedroom apartments, so they're not really bringing in larger families. But from a K through 12, we'd see the high end being 44.
All right, thank you for your question. We're going to move on to Grace Stranch. I think I'm saying that correctly.
Hi, yes, you said that correctly. I have just a bunch of questions, but I'm gonna leave it to one. Emergency and a lot of flood issues, and that's some of our concerns around this development. I actually have a procedural question because I have our interns who've been asking questions and they're not showing up on the side. So I want to ask if you're only posting those once you answer them, or I don't know if there's something technical going on with that. The other thing I wanted to ask is, what is the height above the 100-year floodplain elevation for the bridge? And how much is that above the 2010 flood level? And I know it's not directly on the line. It's a little off the line, but those are my questions.
Well,
Thank you.
and great questions. I know flooding is a key concern. So one thing I'd want to mention too is the minimum finished floor of our buildings can be is 4 foot above the 100-year floodplain. What we're looking at is they're going to be elevated even higher than that over the 100-year floodplain. So if the 100-year floodplain is elevation 100, the finished floor where you walk into the first unit, the bottom floor unit, is going to be 104 at a minimum. We're probably looking more like 106 to 108. I say all that, and I know your question was regarding the bridge. But when you look at where the bridge lands, it's got to land at that elevation, right? So it's going to be significantly above that 100-year floodplain. Now we have to meet the existing grade of Coley Davis on the north side, obviously. So we'll be coming from a higher elevation where we're located at our site, and then slightly sloping down towards Coley Davis. From the 100-year floodplain, we'll have significant clearance above that. From what most people look at, the May 10 flood, from the photos that we have seen, you will have dry access at Coley Davis. So if you have dry access at Coley Davis, our bridge will be taller and higher. I say taller, the elevation will be higher. So the bridge will be elevated even out of that flood event coming from Coley Davis up to where we are. The exact elevations, those will have to be worked out, when we go to construction document level. We have a professional, experienced structural bridge designer. They've got to look at that both from being able to cross that section above flood waters, but also how to have zero negative impact on the flood waters that are going under that bridge. And again, minimizing the length in which we cross was crucial. This was our shortest route, and we made that route. So hopefully that helps answer your question. And it's a great question. If we build a bridge, it's going to go under during flooding. What good is the bridge? So we understand that dynamic, and it would be designed appropriately. The further details will come out through construction documents should we get to that stage.
And Grace, to answer your question about the Q&A, it should be available on the side. Sade, any thoughts on instructing how to access that?
It's down at the bottom on my screen.
Yeah, it's on the side on my screen.
Yes, the Q&A is in the bottom right corner. If you're only seeing the chat panel, you should see 3 dots, and it says panel options, and you can click panel options, and you should see the Q&A panel.
And just to note on that too, Sade, I noticed that if I have the chat open, I can't have the Q&A gets minimized. So if you have the chat option open, maybe X out of that to access the Q&A. All right, we're gonna move on to Melanie Job. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And you did say it right. So I'm a resident of Riverbridge down the street. I know our neighbors all out down here have a lot of concerns, primarily about flooding impact, because even as recently as March of 2021, there was flooding that filled the entire floodplain that's shown in this map right now. So all the areas that are in purple, like that was all underwater. And in our neighborhood, it was coming up almost to the houses. And that wasn't a really significant flood event. That was not even listed in, people talk about like 2019 and 2010. That was kind of a blip. And that's been happening more and more often, and especially in the soccer fields area. And so there's a lot of concern about, the flooding runoff in addition to the traffic, because Coley Davis is a very narrow road. And if we're adding this traffic, there's occasionally head-on collisions. There's times where trucks have come across I-40 onto Coley Davis. There's just, it can be a dangerous stretch of road right around that corner. And so adding in traffic right there, and also a bike lane, which is going to narrow the road further, seems like it's going to increase the dangers on that road on top of just the traffic overall. Which that light isn't really designed to handle. It's got room for maybe like 4 cars to turn left to go toward the interstate, and so if we're talking about adding a lot of extra traffic, we're going to have backup way down that road. Is there any plan for the city to, increase infrastructure for Coley Davis, or to make sure we're not like cutting off access for residents with that construction? Even, temporarily. A lot of us work in medical. A lot of our neighborhood is all, doctors at Vanderbilt, and so we're trying to get in and out a lot. So that's, and quickly. So that's a big concern as well.
Okay, I appreciate your concerns. all valid, and we don't want to, just kind of wash those off to the side. So I've heard flooding and traffic, and flooding was, I think you said was coming up to that point on Coley Davis, and I recall I drove by it at that point and saw it myself. The best we can say to that is a floodplain will function as a floodplain, and that's exactly what it's doing when it hits those marks. In regards to events, all we can say is our development being added to this property is not going to increase that event. And we will be held to that. Is not going to change it, whether we're there, whether we're not. But if we're there, that flooding is not going to increase any further than it does today. So we're not going to increase it. We cannot control weather events. We are held to meet design standards to accommodate that 100-year floodplain, and we will meet it. Otherwise, we won't get a permit. Traffic, great points there. And I hear you. Having we're adding additional cars. There's no question that's going to be added there. I will say that we are at the last half mile of Coley Davis, but I hear what you're saying there as well. Well, it's a shared outlet with everybody to the west of Coley Davis. In terms of construction traffic, that will be on us to make sure we mitigate any kind of and avoid any kind of road closure, and ideally avoid any kind of peak hours. So the peak hours are the 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and the 4:30 to 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night. And of staying out of that area and off the road and not adding additional traffic from a construction standpoint will be something that we can mitigate and control, and would look at that to minimize any kind of negative impact on the residents during the construction aspect of it. In terms of the road itself, the road is built to accommodate significant more trips per day than what it currently has. That is actually a healthy cross section of a full 2-lane Metro standard road. And I would say where it seems like that the bike path would make it more dangerous, by actually narrowing that section, the bike path has been shown that it will actually slow traffic down, because it feels like this is a pedestrian area now, and my lane is narrower, so I'm going to drive a little bit slower. Now, we cannot control each and individual driver, but that has been seen in multiple bike lane applications, that narrowing the lanes and adding bike lanes actually slow traffic. Thus, by slowing it, theoretically would make it more of a safer route than a dangerous route. In terms of Highway 70 and the intersection up there, that is a TDOT road as well as Metro. We will be willing to look in assessment of the signalization of that light to see if there's an efficiency on the timing there that would work. Now, it is in sync with all the other lights down Highway 70, so it's tricky there. But in terms of assessing that signalization and seeing if there can be an improvement, that is something we can certainly look into. Now, that's not something we can just do. You have to have Metro and TDOT's approval to do that. But I do hear that concern and appreciate that question.
All right, we are going to move on to Mark Wallace.
Now I'm on. Hello, thanks for the opportunity to talk. I have a comment and then a question. The comment is, I think, it's really a poor assumption to think that the designated 100-year floodplain is accurate. Many of us who've lived in this community have seen that stake that designates the 100-year floodplain go underwater many, many times over the last 5 to 10 years. So I think that's a really poor assumption. And the river's been rerouted is the other piece that Jim Rossi has pointed out, making any data that really relates to the 100-year floodplain pretty much meaningless and inaccurate at this point. My point, really, what I want to talk about, my question is, and my wife was just talking to me and saying that, you know, these events are happening at increasing frequency. I want to deal with there is a traffic plan that's been circulated. And I know a lot of the conversations revolve around traffic. We have serious concerns about the traffic, and I have serious concerns about the traffic plan itself. I mean, first off, there's no left turn lane onto the bridge, which seems to me almost ludicrous in terms of the amount of backup that you'll get associated with that. The assumptions that are embedded within the plan about number of trips seem to me really serious underestimates of what would be happening from a 417 unit complex. There's a mention in there that Coley Davis will never connect on the other end to McCrory Lane. That's actually in conflict with the Bellevue Community Plan, which talks about a future connection between Coley Davis and McCrory Lane. And then finally, for a study like this to have absolutely no mention of emergency vehicles seems to me almost unethical to not even really consider that. So if you can answer a subset of those, I'd really deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, could you repeat the last point about emergency vehicles?
Yeah, that it does not show that there's no mention in the traffic plan of emergency vehicles. And given, you know, on Coley Davis, it's a nursing home, assisted living facility, there's constant ambulance traffic that's moving back and forth.
Well, I believe that that's going to be integrated into the day-to-day traffic. We do have our traffic transportation engineer, Brennan Baxter, on. And Brennan, I'll let you kind of speak to that as far as the detail of the plan. What we have done is a traffic impact study per the requirements of Metro Nashville and per AASHTO as well. And Brandon, you can speak to that and review that with NDOT. I will say, you know, the left-hand turn lanes coming in, it's really a function of the traffic. When people are coming home and turning left into the site, typically everybody's coming home and you don't have a lot of traffic going the other direction leaving. So it flows relatively smoothly. So that was kind of the thought process there, but the trips, generations, and the capacity of the road reflected that wasn't needed either. But Brandon, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I can do that, Alan. I'll try to touch on those points that I heard. And Anita, I see you there. I'll try to do it quickly. So Anita started off the meeting. She talked about the visioning part of the land use and then also the zoning part of the law. And Metro has a traffic impact study policy that is part of that zoning process. It's a policy. It's part of the zoning. It's part of the law that has to be completed with developments. We worked through that process with Nashville Department of Transportation. I think at the time we started, they were the Public Works Department. They've had a rebranding and have become the Department of Transportation, but we have worked with them through that process. That includes meeting with them before we do any work to establish what are the parameters and things that we're going to look at to comply with their policy. Then we go do that work. We bring all of our data and all of our results back to them. They review it, and then they coordinate with Anita and the other planning staff to issue comments, any requirements or recommendations related to the project, and those go forward, to Planning Commission, to Council later on through the same process that we're in right now with this meeting. So we have worked with NDOT. They reviewed the study. Right now, I believe they are in concurrence with that study. A few of the items I heard about the number of vehicles and there being some question about the source of that. So the number of vehicles generated by the development is pulled from it's a nationwide database of data that is collected at developments similar to this one, and also for many other land uses, commercial, industrial, other types of residential. and it's all split up based on the land use, and you can even parse it down into the region of the country you're in and things of that nature. But it's the standard of care in our industry. It's from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's not something that Metro develops on their own, and it's not something that the development team develops on their own. It's a nationwide database that information is pulled from. So we use that. As far as to traffic on Coley Davis Road, and I guess specifically the emergency traffic, my grandmother actually was a resident at the Meadows until she was 95. She took a couple of those ambulance rides from the Meadows out of Coley Davis. So I'm very well aware that occurs. Those events don't happen at any specific time. They're essentially, at least in my world where I come from, that's a random event. The road is already capable of carrying those heavy vehicles, whether it's an ambulance or even a fire truck. Structurally, those vehicles can use Coley Davis, and we're not doing anything to that road that's going to undermine that or make it where those vehicles cannot pass on Coley Davis. But as far as being able to plan specifically for when they might come through, since they're essentially random events based on the nature of the emergency at hand, it's not something that's part of Metro's policy in traffic impact studies, and not something that we look at on a routine basis either. I hope that covers everything I need. I want to turn it back over to you, Megan.
All right, we're gonna go to the next person, Tom Young.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just a comment and then a question at the end, I suppose. I'm a senior broker at a real estate brokerage here in town. Davidson County resident, Bellevue resident. I first of all, I appreciate the complexity of developing a project within this piece of land. I understand the potential benefit to the community as a whole. My question, I suppose, my concern is I see this additional Metro government land that we would have access to, which in theory would be certainly an improvement for the community. However, seeing as it is all but a sliver there is floodplain or floodway, how much development or tax dollars would the local government really be incentivized to put in to develop that land if every couple of years those developments are washed away by water? And so that kind of question, if you're kind of looking at it from a 10,000 foot view, is okay, well, this really just looks like another apartment complex in Bellevue. And as someone who's worked in real estate for almost 10 years, I can tell you the perception of Bellevue to people from outside Bellevue is, oh, well, it's just a bunch of apartment complexes and townhomes. And so if this really is just an additional apartment complex with access to just essentially woods, I would just say that it stands to perpetuate the stigma of Bellevue, which is just, again, apartment complexes and townhomes. And I don't necessarily see, unless there is a real plan to develop that government land into a true accessible park, trails, things like that, which I'm not sure I've heard. That's my concern. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate your opinion there and your thoughts on that. And people can have that perspective of Bellevue. I don't necessarily agree with it, but they can. However, more directly to the Metro Parkland, the 51 acres. You look at this color here, and you're like, well, you can't do anything like that with a park. Well, actually, if you look to the 20 acres that we're going to dedicate to them, and the soccer fields on the other side of the river, you're able to use that as a active area as a park. I'm not saying that Metro would do that, but they absolutely could. It goes underwater, and it still comes back as a park. Parking lot's still there. The facilities are still there. The Greenway is in majority floodplain, so it floods and it comes back. So in looking at the metro side, the 51 acres, I can't tell you how Metro Parks would program it. I can tell you their incentive to program it with anything at all would be driven by, do they have access to it? And this access gives them an incentive to activate it. I personally, I see this, being similar to what a Percy Warner Park would be, more passive. It gives people access to a canopied area, access down to the river, walking trails, maybe some bike trails in there as well. But that's me. That's my opinion. Metro Parks has been doing this a long time. They have a lot of park system in the floodplain. And so I feel comfortable that they would design it appropriately to accommodate it when it does flood and when the floods go away. I think you see that in the majority of the parks that sit in the floodplains today. But I appreciate that thought.
Wonderful. Okay, so we have a continuing people asking questions and raising their hands, but we are about to wrap up. There are a lot of questions in the Q&A that we will get a record of that and we can continue to answer. For those of you who have your hand raised and have not been able to ask a question, send it to me, Anita, ANITA McKeag, MCCAIG @nashville.gov, and we'll add those to the list and continue to answer. I wanted to give the council members, we've had about around 200 people attend this meeting. That's wonderful. I wanted to give the council members a chance to add anything or say anything. Alan and development team, I'm hearing that there's still a lot of questions to be answered and more information to share with the community. So in my mind, that means deferring your applications and continuing to work with the community on sharing some materials and sharing answers and everything. We can continue talking about that though. Councilman Rosenberg, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Anita, and I agree. So, first and foremost, thanks to everyone who signed on tonight or has otherwise been engaged in advocating for our community, being inquisitive and skeptical and all the things. And also Anita, Logan, Sade, Olivia for spending their evening here with us. I guess 200 of us. Yeah, I think that there's still a lot of questions that folks have and a lot of information that's available to be provided. So I think that we need to allow time for that. It's been, it's really been kind of fascinating watching this process because there are so many moving parts to it. For every time that somebody has come and proposed an apartment development the last 7 years, it's been an outright no. Why don't we build some ownership units? Because Bellevue so badly needed to be focused on building ownership in our community. That's not a knock on anybody who chooses to rent. It's just the fact that we needed more investment in our community over the last several years, and I think it's made a big difference. I know Gloria and Sherry and Bo been kind of focused the same way in their time. This is more complicated because it also brings some benefits that, like Anita outlined at the beginning. But part of that complexity is with the added benefits also come a lot of added questions. So I'm going to continue to listen to everyone, and we'll see where we go from here. Thank y'all. Please continue to share your thoughts and concerns and questions and all that, so I can do everything I can to represent you. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Hauser, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you. And I have a request. When you put together all the questions and your answers, would you please make sure and share that with Dave and I so that we're aware of all that?
Absolutely. We'll post it to our website too, so people can access it.
Great.
We'll try to find the easiest way to corral materials and everything and have people linked to where we can access things.
Well, and I think that is very important. I think one of the things early on is since the project actually is in District 35, I think a lot of the people in District 22 felt like they had not gotten all the communication. So I just ask you to please make sure and include above 22 and 35 in all communication. And just keep Dave and I abreast of this each step of the way so we can answer questions when our constituents ask us. Because I think all their concerns are valid concerns. That doesn't mean you kill a project, but it does mean that all those concerns need to be answered in a way that everybody feels heard and that their issues have been solved. And I appreciate the fact that there are the benefits to the community for the greenways and the connectivity that Alan has addressed. I think that's all really nice. I just want to make sure that we really look at Coley Davis and the 70 intersection and make sure we've done whatever needs to be done to make that safe and to handle the traffic, and do whatever needs to be done on Coley Davis to make it wide enough to take on the bike lanes and the pedestrian bridges. I agree with Alan that the visual of having the bike lane with the pylons does slow down traffic and make people more cautious. That's a traffic calming measure that we often hear. And I agree with him on that. We just need to make sure that everyone is heard and that everything is as transparent as possible. And I applaud what you've done so far and just, reiterate, please keep doing that. Please keep making it as open and transparent throughout the entire process. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. I hope that folks feel that even though we may not have gotten to all the questions, that we did try to move as quickly as we could through things and provide some detailed questions and answers. Like I said, we will keep on the Q&A and keep on responding. I know some of the questions about flooding and FEMA floodplain designations and studies we'll share with Stormwater and get some answers for those materials as well. So thank you. I know civic engagement is a tough process, taking time and energy to participate in this, but I really appreciate such a great turnout. And I've had a lot of help here tonight with putting on this meeting and answering questions. So thank everyone for participating. And thanks, Sade, for helping us with all our IT issues. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.